The ocean, a place of wonder and mystery, is home to a wide variety of marine life, including the shark, which is sometimes misinterpreted. Although human shark attacks are uncommon, they can have disastrous results. Promoting coexistence and guaranteeing the safety of both humans and sharks requires an understanding of the elements that lead to these incidents, such as shark behavior, human activity, and environmental conditions. Future tragedies can be avoided and marine ecosystems preserved by clearing up misconceptions and encouraging respect for these apex predators. Here are 6 tales. On January 14, 2025, which was early morning in the United States, about 30 miles off the coast of San Francisco, California, the reconnaissance ship Valiant, commanded by Captain Eric Thaddeus Dawson, was anchored close to the Farallon Islands. A ragged collection of rocky outcrops, the Farallon Islands were renowned for their rich marine life, including one of the world's densest populations of great white sharks and their hazardous waters. Despite the island's extensive maritime history, which included shipwrecks and scientific research, nothing could have prepared the Valiant's crew for the horror that was about to happen. The mission was standard: to obtain information about any reported unusual marine activity in the region. A surge in great white shark sightings along the Pacific coast had been observed by the United States Navy, with the Farallon Islands serving as a hotspot. The risks had been explained to Captain Dawson, a seasoned officer with more than 20 years of experience, but he still had faith in his crew's capacity to manage any circumstance. Modern sonar and tracking systems were installed on the Valiant, and its 12-member crew was one of the most well-behaved in the fleet. The crew continued their work as the sun rose over the horizon, illuminating the rough seas with a spooky glow. Petty Officer Juniper Marlowe kept an eye on the sonar for any indications of movement. At the same time, Lieutenant Commander Alaric Quintus Voss, the ship's second-in-command, oversaw the deployment of underwater drones. The location had a reputation for being ominous, but the atmosphere was serene and calm at around 10:17 a.m. The peace was broken when the alerts on Petty Officer Marlowe's console started to blare. A huge object, thought to be more than 18 feet long, was quickly approaching the surface. Before anyone could react, a violent spray of water erupted. A huge great white shark dove out of the ocean and landed on the deck of the Valiant, its sleek body gleaming in the sunlight. Crew members scrambled for cover as the deafening impact sent equipment flying. Captain Dawson, who had been examining data close to the starboard rail, was taken by surprise. The shark's massive maw, lined with rows of sharp teeth, was headed straight for him. The creature's strong jaws crushed bone and tissue with terrifying ease as it clamped down on Dawson's torso in a flash. The shark's tail struck the bulkhead with enough force to dent the metal, causing blood to spray across the deck as it thrashed violently. Despite being prepared for emergencies, the attack's extreme brutality paralyzed the crew. The first to gather his thoughts was Lieutenant Commander Voss, who yelled commands to help the captain and secure the area. The shark's frantic movements prevented Petty Officer Marlowe from getting a clear shot when he retrieved a harpoon from the equipment locker. Several crew members sprang into action, grabbing ropes and emergency poles in a desperate attempt to pull Captain Dawson back. Lieutenant Commander Voss lunged forward, trying to secure the captain's arm, while others scrambled to form a barrier to keep the shark from dragging him overboard. But the creature's sheer strength was overwhelming. With a violent thrash, it yanked Dawson to the deck's edge, knocking the crew back. The shark plunged into the ocean before they could get a firm grip, taking the captain in one last nauseating lurch. There was anarchy in the wake. The crew launched a desperate search using sonar and spotlights to scan the water, but neither Dawson nor the shark could be found. The only remnants were a pool of blood that stained the deck and shredded pieces of his uniform. When naval officials later viewed the footage, they said it was among the most graphic and disturbing recordings ever seen. The incident was caught on the ship's surveillance cameras. Word of the attack quickly spread, leading to widespread indignation and panic. To evaluate the video and offer insights into the shark's behavior, marine biologists and shark specialists were consulted. Dr. Isolde Calliope Finch, an expert on great white sharks, pointed out that although these attacks were extremely uncommon, they weren't completely out of the ordinary. Dr. Finch said that the shark might have been agitated by the ship's sonar, or it might have thought the ship was prey because of the deck's reflective surface. The incident spurred urgent discussions. The creation of shark deterrent devices and updated procedures for conducting business in shark-infested waters were among the measures suggested to lessen the likelihood of future encounters. Already a restricted area, the Farallon Islands were subject to even more stringent monitoring. Years would pass while the Valiant's crew dealt with the trauma of that day. Having seen the attack firsthand, Lieutenant Commander Voss battled survivors' guilt and nightmares. Despite being praised for her prompt decision-making, Petty Officer Marlowe decided to leave active duty soon after the incident. There was a gap left by the passing of Captain Dawson, a well-liked mentor and leader. A sobering reminder of the unpredictability and frequently fatal force of nature. The tale of the Valiant and its unfortunate captain became a cautionary story in the aftermath. Once a symbol of wonder and fascination, the great white shark now had a darker meaning for people who had seen its ferocity up close. The memory of that day served as a sobering reminder of the vulnerability of human life in the face of nature's most formidable predators, even though the Farallon Islands' waters were still exceedingly dangerous. February 6, 2025, Svalbard, Norway. A vast expanse of ice and water, the Arctic was a harsh environment where life fought against the cold. Deep inside the Arctic Circle, the archipelago of Svalbard was home to polar bears, walruses, and some of the oldest and most enigmatic creatures found in the deep. Experienced marine biologist Simon Reeves had come to investigate the Greenland shark, one of the most elusive predators in the northern seas. Simon was almost obsessed with Greenland sharks and had studied deep-sea predators for more than 10 years. These slow-moving scavengers, which some people believe to be over 400 years old, were hardly ever seen, and even fewer were ever closely examined. Many people thought they were harmless because of their slowness. Simon and his research team, however, had started to doubt that presumption. Simon and his group departed from their ice station close to the frozen waters of Smeerenburg-Fjorden early on February 6th. The sun shone in the distance, barely reaching the horizon, and the sky was a light gray. The wind sliced like knives through their insulated suits as the temperature hovered around -20 degrees Celsius. His team consisted of 2 support crew members, oceanographer Elias Voss and dive technician Marit Halderson, who remained on the surface to monitor the dive. A hole large enough for a diver to pass through had been drilled through the ice the previous evening. The sea beneath the ice was a different world, silent, dark, and eerily beautiful. The only one going down today was Simon. He had an oxygen tank capable of handling the pressure of deep dives, and his dry suit was reinforced for extreme cold. He was attached to the surface by a safety line, which served as a lifeline in case of an emergency. The world above dimmed as he tumbled down into the cold depths. Because of the floating ice particles, visibility in the water was diminished. The seabed below, a stony, desolate region coated in a thin layer of silt, was visible through the darkness as his flashlight shone through it. Due to the almost freezing temperatures, schools of fish moved more slowly as they drifted. Then he noticed it. Just out of range of his light was a Greenland shark, easily 16 feet long. Its gray, lifeless flesh was covered in a patchwork of old wounds and parasites, giving it rough, scarred skin. Its unseeing, milky eyes gave it a spooky appearance, as though it were something ancient and out of place. Simon had seen these sharks before, but not to this extent. He took his time adjusting his camera to catch the action. The shark hardly responded. Its slow motions gave the impression of a giant that didn't care. He approached cautiously, careful not to move too quickly. Then, a change occurred. The shark twitched out of nowhere after drifting carelessly. It tensed its body and charged ahead before Simon could react. His left arm began to hurt before he could even register the movement. His flashlight shattered out of his hand and landed in the depths, spinning. As the shark clamped down, its teeth dug into flesh and scraped through his dry suit's fabric like rough sandpaper. Blood swirled around him, slow and dark in the icy water. Simon's legs kicked wildly as he thrashed. He was yanked downward with terrifying force as the shark's grip tightened. The only thing holding him to the ground was his safety line. Marit and Elias watched as the line snapped above the ice. Panic set in. Without the safety line, Simon had no way to guide himself back to the surface, and his oxygen tank was running out. Deeper into the icy abyss, where no human could endure, the shark continued to drag him. His movement slowed as the cold began to sap his strength. Despite his fingers being numb, he reached for his dive knife. He felt a tear, either in his arm, wetsuit, or both, as the shark twisted. His vision blurred. He could feel his breath growing shallow even though his regulator remained in his mouth. The pressure of the deep weighed down on him. Above the ice, there was nothing his team could do. With no backup diver available for an emergency rescue and no idea where he had been dragged, they were helpless. They couldn't reach him in time, though the ice hole provided a narrow passage. Minutes passed, then an hour, but the water remained still. The reality hit when a piece of his wetsuit surfaced, a ghostly presence floating on the water. The strap of his broken dive mask snapped cleanly into two pieces. Simon was nowhere to be found. No movement, no body beneath the ice. The team had no choice but to declare him lost. The news quickly spread throughout the scientific community. Although Greenland sharks were not typically known for their violent behavior, seasoned diver Simon Reeves was dragged to his death by one. Rather than uncovering more about the elusive species, his research raised troubling questions. His colleagues at the Arctic Marine Research Institute released a report on the incident, which ignited a flurry of discussions among marine biologists. Was the shark's attack driven by hunger? Or could something in the circumstances, perhaps the vibration from the equipment or even Simon's movements, have triggered an unexpected response? The attack was considered by some to be an anomaly, a rare instance of identity theft, or the unpredictable behavior of an injured shark. Others speculated that Greenland sharks, once thought to be passive scavengers, might actually be more opportunistic than previously believed. The scientific community was left with a gap after Simon vanished, but it also brought with it the unsettling realization that humans knew far less about the deep than they had assumed. At the ice station, Simon Reeves's last known location, a memorial plaque was erected. Although it was insufficient, his research remained a valuable testament to his efforts. A Greenland shark carried the last moments of a man who had dared to approach too closely, swimming through the icy black waters of the Arctic. Biscayne Bay, Florida, February 11, 2024. The waters of Biscayne Bay shimmered under the afternoon sun, and a deep blue expanse stretched toward the horizon. The bay, known for its warm currents and teeming marine life, had always been a hotspot for thrill-seekers and extreme sports enthusiasts. But on this particular day, it became the stage for what was supposed to be a record-breaking event, one that would end in tragedy. Marcus Maverick Hayes, a 34-year-old professional stuntman, had made a name for himself in the world of extreme water sports. With a career spanning over a decade, he had performed stunts that defied logic, soaring over waterfalls, racing through choppy waters at breakneck speeds, and executing mid-air flips with pinpoint precision. However, that day's stunt was supposed to be his most audacious to date, a high-speed jump from a floating ramp that would take him 80 feet above the water before landing on a second ramp that was farther ahead. No one had attempted such a feat before. His team, consisting of engineers, safety coordinators, and medical personnel, had spent months planning the event. The ramps were adjusted to perfection, the tides were monitored, and every safety measure was put in place. Journalists, spectators, and fellow athletes had gathered along the shoreline, eager to witness history in the making. Among them was Marcus's longtime friend and stunt coordinator Tobias "Toby" Kriegson, a man known for his meticulous planning and relentless pursuit of perfection. That morning, he had double-checked the calculations to ensure the stunt was theoretically flawless. Marcus cranked the engine of his specially designed Aqua bike, a sleek, powerful vehicle capable of reaching speeds of more than 70 miles per hour, as the countdown began. He skimmed the surface with expert control as he took off, the sound of crashing waves mingling with the roar of the engine. He sped up to the top of the ramp, sending the bike flying in a perfect line. For a brief instant, it appeared that everything was proceeding as planned. Marcus's body leaned forward in perfect form as he soared over the water, which caused the crowd to cheer. But then a problem arose. Mid-flight, the wind pushed against him stronger than expected. He changed his angle just enough to make his landing less accurate. He slammed into the water at a dangerous angle after his Aqua bike front dipped too soon, missing the second ramp. Marcus was launched into the air by the impact, his body fluttering wildly before he crashed into the bay. There was a brief period of silence. Holding their breath, the audience watched for Marcus to come back to the surface. When he did, his body was bouncing in the waves. He looked confused and struggling to breathe. His crew jumped right in and rushed in a rescue boat to meet him. What no one noticed, at least not at first, was the dark shadow moving beneath the surface. Biscayne Bay, despite its popularity, was also home to some of the ocean's most formidable predators. Although uncommon, great white sharks were not unheard of in these waters. On this particular day, a 15-foot great white had been hiding in the deeper channels, enticed by the stunt's vibrations. Still disoriented from the crash, Marcus struggled to orient himself. He weakly kicked his legs, unaware of the massive creature circling beneath him. The first sign of danger, according to Ezra Langford, a member of the rescue crew, was the distinctive dorsal fin cutting through the water. Marcus couldn't hear the shouts from the boat as he was too far away. Then, it happened. Marcus's right leg was clamped by the shark's strong jaws as it struck with terrifying speed and pulled him under. As the crew rushed to reach him, the water churned violently and turned red. Watching from the control deck, Toby's stomach dropped. He was ready for any eventuality, but this one was different. Jonah Venswick, one of the crew, dove into the water with a rescue pole as the group maneuvered the boat closer. Marcus reappeared, his face twisted in agony as he struggled against the shark's grip. When the shark let go and vanished into the depths, Jonah was able to hook the pole under Marcus's arm and pull him toward the boat. Marcus was dragged aboard, his body limp and unresponsive. The crew quickly realized the worst. He had already succumbed to his injuries in the water. The medical team could do nothing but confirm what they all feared. By the time they reached the shore, the legend of Marcus Hayes had already come to an end. News of the tragedy spread like wildfire. What was meant to be a historical stunt had turned into a nightmare, a grim reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean. Investigations were launched, though there was no one to blame, except perhaps the arrogance of human ambition against nature's raw power. Toby Kriegson, devastated by the loss of his friend, retired from stunt coordination, unable to shake the guilt. The event organizers faced scrutiny, though no legal action was taken. Marcus had known the risks. A week later, fans, family, and other athletes rallied at the bay for a memorial service. Marcus was honored for his spirit of adventure and his audacious deeds. A simple engraving that read, "Marcus Maverick Hayes," a man who defied limits until the ocean reminded him of its own, was placed on a plaque close to the shoreline where the stunt had occurred. The ocean had claimed another life, not out of malice, but as a reminder of its dominion. The great white shark, indifferent to human affairs, had simply followed its instincts. And in the end, Marcus Hayes became part of the very legend he had sought to create, not as a record breaker, but as a cautionary tale of how nature always has the final say. July 18, 2023, San Diego, California. Off San Diego's coast, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, its surface glistening in the midday sun. In addition to their beauty, the waters here were notoriously dangerous. Aspiring officers had long used the coastline as a hub for naval training operations and as a testing ground where the United States Navy put human endurance to the test. Lieutenant Jack Foster found himself engaged in a life-or-death struggle with one of nature's most dreaded predators just outside the protected harbor. Jack was a disciplined officer, a skilled swimmer, and a man who had spent years training for the demands of military service. With his body hardened by constant training, he was in top physical condition at 31. In order to hone survival instincts, the exercise that day was intended to mimic a high-risk rescue mission. As in a real emergency, Jack had to swim to a simulated distressed vessel in open water while fully outfitted. The scenario was straightforward. The visibility was good, and the waves were moderate. Jack breathed deliberately and stroked efficiently as he moved steadily through the water. Several other officers watched his progress from an inflatable rigid hull boat nearby. The workout seemed to be going well. Then, something moved beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to Jack, a great white shark over 17 feet long and nearly 2 tons in weight had been drawn to the commotion. The splashing and the movement, these were signals the predator could not ignore. It had been lurking further offshore, But now curiosity and instinct had taken over. It moved in silently, its dark eyes locking onto Jack as it closed the distance. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a shadow, an enormous shifting mass beneath him. Jack's instincts kicked in, but before he could react, the shark surged upward from the depths. The impact was explosive. The force of the strike sent shockwaves through Jack's body as the shark's jaws clamped down on his right leg. Pain shot through him, sharp and immediate, as rows of serrated teeth tore through muscle and bone. The water around him turned red. Jack struggled, his survival instincts overriding the agony. The shark's grip was merciless, its head shaking violently in an attempt to drag him under. To get out, he thrashed, kicked, and punched. Nothing could have fully prepared him for this, even though his training had taught him to maintain composure under pressure. Immediately, his fellow officers responded from the boat. Miles Redford, the chief petty officer, and the day lead training officer yelled commands. While others rushed to seize rescue supplies, Ensign Victor Calloway, the boat driver, cranked up the engine and headed straight for Jack. Farther away, a second boat made a sharp turn and its crew hurried to help. As the shark dragged Jack beneath, his vision became blurry. The world around him twisted into a chaotic blur of red and blue as the salt water burned his wounds. Strapped to his vest, he reached for his dive knife, his fingers fumbling as the predator held on. The shark then released him just as abruptly as it had attacked. His limbs felt heavy as his body drifted upward. Blood loss was setting in. His fellow crew members' voices became more distinct above. A line was thrown just a few inches from his face. With the last of his remaining strength, he grabbed it. Chief Redford pulled him in, holding onto the line as others helped. With his leg in a shredded mess, Jack's body was thrown over the side. Ensign Calloway applied pressure to the wound right away to stop the bleeding. Jack's breathing was shallow and his face was pale. The boat radioed ahead for emergency medical personnel as it sped toward the coast. Each second mattered. Jack lived, but there was serious damage. Several surgeries were necessary due to the deep wounds caused by the shark's bite. His naval career would never be the same, but he would be able to walk once more. The assault left psychological as well as physical wounds. He had almost lost his life because he had encountered something primordial and uncontrollable. The incident rocked naval training procedures. Following the start of a thorough review, exercises in shark-prone areas were modified. Increased precautions and countermeasures were put in place. But Jack didn't let the assault define who he was. Despite his wounds, he went back to the water months later. Not as a trainee officer, but as a survivor who refused to let fear rule his life. And the great white shark continued to swim somewhere off the coast of San Diego, unconcerned by the mayhem it had caused. On the morning of August 12, 2023, the sun rose over the Santa Cruz coastline, casting a golden glow across the Pacific Ocean. The waters were calm, the sky a brilliant blue, and the air carried the salty tang of the sea. It was the kind of day that lured families to the water, and for the Torres family, it was the perfect opportunity for a fishing trip. The Torres family, comprising 42-year-old marine engineer Octavio Torres, his 39-year-old wife Marisol Torres, a high school biology teacher, and their two children, 10-year-old Jacob Torres and 14-year-old Lucia Torres, had set out from the Santa Cruz harbor aboard their 24-foot fishing boat, the Mariposa. The family had planned a day of bonding, laughter, and hopefully a few good catches. But what started as a pleasant excursion would quickly turn into a nightmare that would follow them around for the rest of their lives. Santa Cruz, a coastal city in central California, was well known for its beautiful beaches, abundant marine life, and sadly, its shark encounter history. The area belongs to the Red Triangle, a body of water that is well known for having a high concentration of great white sharks and runs between Bodega Bay, the Farallon Islands, and Big Sur. The large populations of seals living on the rocky beaches and islands in the area attracted these apex predators. Although there had been many shark sightings and a few attacks over the years, fatalities were still uncommon, believing that such tragedies happened to others, not to them. The Torres family had always taken precautions, despite being aware of the risks. The day started quietly. About 3 miles offshore, Octavio sailed the Mariposa to a spot where the water was deep enough for a respectable catch while remaining visible from the coast. While Lucia, always the responsible older sister, watched over Jacob, who was giddy with anticipation. Marisol made sandwiches and snacks. Curious and full of energy, Jacob had always found the ocean to be fascinating. He cherished every aspect of it, including the fish, the waves, and the hidden mysteries. His favorite toy, a tiny plastic dolphin he named Splash, was with him that morning. He held it close as he looked over the side of the boat. At approximately 11:30 a.m., the family saw some dolphins swimming close by. Their whistles and clicks reverberated over the waves as the streamlined, playful animals gracefully jumped out of the water. Jacob was elated. He shouted and pointed joyfully while leaning over the railing, his laughter resonating like music. Octavio kept a steady hand on the wheel while Marisol took pictures. Ever watchful, Lucia cautioned Jacob to exercise caution, but his excitement overpowered her advice. It occurred in a flash. Jacob shifted his center of gravity by leaning over the edge as the dolphins approached the boat. He lost his balance and fell into the water with a loud splash before anyone could react. Octavio instantly cut the engine as Marisol screamed and dropped her phone. With her heart racing, Lucia hurried to the boat side and looked around for her brother. Jacob surfaced moments later, coughing and sputtering, his arms flailing as he tried to stay afloat. He was confused by the shock of the fall and the cold water. Octavio snatched up a life ring and threw it at his son while yelling for Jacob to grasp on. Meanwhile, with her hands shaking so much that she could hardly press the buttons, Marisol dialed 911 on her phone. Lucia kept her eyes locked on Jacob, and her voice was steady as she encouraged him to swim toward the ring. However, the water appeared to darken before Jacob could make it to the life ring. A huge, slick, and threatening shadow moved beneath the surface. The family froze as their worst nightmares came to life in front of them. With frightening speed, a great white shark estimated to be 16 feet long surfaced from the depths. Its